All right, I think we should just give a few minutes, 1-2 minutes before we start, if that's okay with everyone. All right, yes. Minute or two, and then we start.
All right.
Okay, I think we can start now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the inaugural webinar in the series on critical dialogues on policing in Canada. My name is Chibo Anyadiba, an assistant professor in the Department of English here in the University of Winnipeg. I am a co-convener of this webinar series with Dr. Michael Eze in the Department of Chemistry, also here in the University of Winnipeg. We are grateful for the Global College support of this event through the Masha Hanen Global Dialogue and Ethics Award. We do want to thank everyone for their support of this event, especially the acting executive director of Global College, Dr. Lloyd Connelson, the Global College Office Coordinator, Bugwindari Enktogs, and our invited panelists and moderator. So before I go on to introduce the event, I want to read out a land acknowledgement which comes from the opening paragraphs of the University of Winnipeg's English Department land acknowledgement. I find the words of the land acknowledgement instructive, particularly in relation to the subject of the webinar today. So we want to acknowledge that we live and work in the territories of the Anishinaabeg, Cree, Dakota, Dene, Métis, and Oji-Cree nations. The University of Winnipeg sits in Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral and traditional homeland of Anishinaabe peoples. Treaty 1, signed in 1871, took this territory from 7 local Anishinaabe First Nations in order to make the land available for settler use and ownership. This land acknowledgement is about being clear and accurate about the original peoples of this land, as well as other indigenous communities who lived and continue to live where the University of Winnipeg stands. It is an expression of respect and appreciation for these ancestors and their present-day relatives who continue to love and care for the land. We offer this acknowledgement in the belief that doing so will help us to be mindful educators, researchers, and members of the University of Winnipeg community. So the Critical Dialogues webinar series is an educational discussion which aims to facilitate critical conversations on policing in relation to knotty issues such as racism, crime, security, community relations, and so on in Canada. A major goal of the series is to enable a space conducive to holding critical dialogues on subjects that many would generally shy away from. Our hope is to use these kinds of conversations to mobilize awareness and encourage education about policing, racism, human rights, and social justice issues in Canada and beyond. The panel conversation today is comprised of members of the Winnipeg community. I will introduce them briefly one after another in no particular order, and then hand things over to the moderator. The first panelist is Titi Tijani. Titi is the president of the African Communities of Manitoba, Inc. As a leader, mother, internationally educated teacher and activist with over 20 years of experience in community development, Titi is a pillar in the Manitoba community. She holds a bachelor's degree in human ecology from the University of Manitoba and certificates in education, community leadership, trainer, and conflict resolution. She has worked with Manitoba Housing since 1998 and currently as manager of tenant services, supporting Manitobans access housing. Titi's contributions to Manitoba have been recognized widely. She has received the Spirit of a Community Builder Award, the Premier's Volunteer Service Award Certificate of Recognition, and most recently, recognition as one of 100 most fascinating Manitobans in 2020. The second panelist is Rhonda Thompson, and who needs no introduction actually. As an avid community supporter, Rhonda has lent her insights and expertise in community relations and finance to a number of organizations. She helps to facilitate community engagement opportunities and acts as a liaison between demographical groups to encourage knowledge transfer. Rhonda volunteers as treasurer on the board of directors for both Black History Month Celebration Committee, Inc. and the Congress of Black Women of Manitoba, Inc. and also an active member of Winnipeg's Police Accountability Coalition. The third panelist is Reverend Edmund Loudon, who is the incumbent priest of St. Saviour's Anglican Church, Winnipeg. Edmund was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan. After finishing his undergraduate degree, Edmund immigrated to Canada in September 1991. He was ordained deacon in 1995 and priest in 1996. He has served in several parishes across different Canadian provinces. Edmund has also served on committees and task forces of the Diocese, Ecclesiastical Province, National Anglican Church, and International Relief and Development Agency. Liberation theology has been the core of his ministry. His academic interests are church in postmodernity, ecumenism, and pluralism. These lenses have assisted Edmund to articulate the fundamentals of justice for every human being. Edmund has been happily married since 1994. In his spare time, he loves to cook and spend time watching the game of cricket. The fourth panelist is Sergeant Doug Lukawi, who is with the RCMP Crime Prevention Services, D Division, Winnipeg. And the fifth panelist is Constable Christopher Joven, who is also with the RCMP and serves as the Diversity Officer of the D Division. And finally, the moderator of today's conversation is Professor Eliakim Sibanda, popularly known as Kim. Kim is a professor of history at the University of Winnipeg and the chair of the University of Winnipeg and University of Manitoba Joint MA program in Peace and Conflict Studies. Please use the Q&A tab below your screen to post questions to the panelists as the conversations go on. I will now turn things over to Kim, and thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ibu. And I will start with trying to explain how we are going to proceed in our discussion, which I'm eagerly looking forward to listening to. And this is how we are going to proceed. We will have each panelist present some opening remarks. And in those opening remarks, just for 5 minutes, each one of us will take 5 minutes doing that. And then you will indicate what your perception about community and police relations is. Just make sure you include that so that we contextualize some of these things. And how do you, as a community member or a police officer, want to be understood by either community or by the police force as such. So that's the first thing that we're going to do, taking 5 minutes. And then the second, then we'll open that to this session to questions. I think we shall feel that then we'll have those questions put across. And at the end, or in conclusion of the panel, we'll have some closing remarks. This is going to be tricky. This is going to be 2 minutes. You are free to summarize your ideas or say what is really burning in your heart after having had the conversation presented, or you can speak to other people's perspectives. Either the panelists address your panelists, or you say something which you would have heard from the participants, or your own personal statement, but in relation to the relationships. That's how it's going to go. And to further contextualize this, I think what we're dealing with really is relationships, which relationships are a two-way street, as we know. They involve engagement. And in the sense, vibrant and positive relationships based on mutual trust, transparency, accountability, truth-telling, and respect are indispensable to effective collaboration between community and police, and also collaborative strategies and keeping the peace as such. All said, respect sums it all. I say respect in this end in terms of relationship, because we usually think of relationships as respect as something that sometimes is based on merit. We say, you earn my respect.
Yeah.
That's an easy thing to do. If somebody earns your respect, is an eye for an eye. Respect is presumptive. In other words, you just respect a person because they're a human being. And based on that, that means one predicated on that issue or on that variable really becomes very important. And as we do all these things, as we go about our businesses, we have to keep in mind in these relationships that respect is not earned. Respect, which is an oxymoron, respect is presumptive. We give people respect because they're just people. That's relationships. In that sense, it is a very difficult thing to do. We work on these relationships. And how do we build this mutual trust, which I started with, is the major question of this session. How do we build that trust, which is strong and is based on these elements that I have already mentioned? Having said that, then, without really pontificating a lot, I'll then open this up to our panelists. And I'll follow the same, I think we are just going to go as the names here were listed, so that I don't have a hard task of trying to say who comes first. In that sense, then we will start with Ms. Tijani to open up, and then we'll follow the order that is there.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And good morning to my fellow panelists. Thanks, Kim and Chigo. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, actually, I'm glad that you give the how it will go, or give us a guide on what to say, because what I wrote down was just based on my perception and how I feel. I'll say, I'm originally from Nigeria, and coming from Nigeria, I was always afraid of the police. I mean, that's how we were raised. You have a fear of the police, or generally law enforcement people. And coming to Canada, arriving in Winnipeg, I saw it differently. And a few years being in Winnipeg, my mindset changed. That fear disappeared. And in fact, there was a time not too long after I arrived that I wanted to be a police officer. And I went to the Division 6 office on Pembina to inquire But unfortunately, at that time, I was already over 30. And so they said that the maximum age is 30 to enroll. So otherwise, I would have been in uniform, been on the other side of the discussion. But why did I want to be a police officer, you may ask? It's because of my experience with the police officers since I've arrived in Winnipeg. I saw police differently here in Canada than how I saw them in Nigeria. I like the way they interacted with me and many other people. I saw humanity in them, I saw compassion, and I saw respect in their interactions with the public. And so maybe that's why I'm in the community helping people, because I see police officers as people that are helping anyone in the community that needs help. I've always also worked in the, been a public servant for over 20 years, working with housing. And so I work with the tenant community. And so we do also have interactions with the police. I work closely with the police seeking their help. And I also understand the need to have some respect with the police, appreciate what they do. And in turn, that helps me to be able to do my job and also help to support my tenant community. There's been different maybe policing styles or policies in Winnipeg, and I know the one that I prefer based on the experiences, not just with me, but that I have seen with community members in Winnipeg. These are the ones, there are ways always done in effort to break down barriers and build a safe community. I often, when we engage, have community events, we always invite the police to come and participate, and in different roles. So they're not coming to arrest, they're not coming to question anybody, they're just coming to participate in that social activity, hence exposing our tenants to meet the police constables and have conversations with them, as normal as we are. And of course, police people are also normal, but somehow, because they're in uniform, I think we, the public, put them in a separate category, and maybe, yeah, they're not normal, they're not like us. But that is part of this conversation to show that, they are also one of us and we are also one in them. So personally, my interactions with the police, I'll say, has been cordial and it's been great, except when they pull me over for traffic offense. That I'm not happy. But even when they pull you over for traffic offense, you know what? They treat me with respect. And I just can't even fight that, other than take the paper from them and go pay. And the key word there, I keep saying, is respect. Dr. Sibanda, you said respect is presumptive, not earned. That is my first time of hearing that, and I'm going to dwell on that. So, and which is right, but I've always said it's earned. So my belief that it's earned, meaning that you give and then you receive back. And so maybe for that reason, I have good relations with them. However, over the years, things began to change gradually in Winnipeg. As the crime rates went up in Winnipeg, so we see and hear news about more instances of rough handling, police brutality against citizens, particularly Indigenous and racialized community members. Also, the images and behaviors of police that we see coming through our TV from the United States is also bad to watch. But what was disturbing for me was to see similar interactions on Canadian TV, and that is when my fear began again to say, when we were seeing those images, it's easy to say it's over there, not here. But unfortunately, we began to see those images, and that fear that disappeared through my experiences and interactions with the police began to come back, not only fearing for myself, fearing for community members, and also fearing for my children and family. You can't see those images and not be angered. And I'm sure people have also passed on or reacted with those images against the police. And the question I often ask myself is, why is Canada becoming like the US? And many other questions, what has, what has led to this breakdown? I thought everything was okay. I thought Canada was different. And now Canada is becoming like the US. So a lot of questions that we all need to ask ourselves. And what did we do to contribute to that? And one of the most important questions that I see is asking about this relationship. How are we going to build mutual respect for humanity? The other question that all of us as community members also must ask ourselves is, who are the police officers? Yes, and I do ask, who are they? Like I said earlier on, I think we put them on this pedestal and we don't think that they are, they're humans. Of course they are. They are people that, are they people that we don't know? They are people we know. Police officers are, first of all, they are community members. They live in communities like we all do. They are our neighbors. They are our friends' brothers. They are sisters to somebody. They are brothers to somebody. They are fathers to somebody. And I think the same question we can ask, the police is also that the person you are interacting with may also be your neighbor. They may be a family member of somebody that you know. They are also somebody's sister, somebody's mother, father. They may be a teacher to your children in their schools. There may be a family doctor that's treating you, your family members and friends and everybody. So my point here is that we need to begin to see that we have more in common than what separates us. And as human as we are, well, we feel that we are, and so are police officers. And so we need to look at things from a different lens in order to understand each other. I do understand very well the grave risks that police officers face in performing their jobs and the importance of making their workplace as safe as possible. So my goal today is to find ways in which we can work with law enforcement on some strategies and actions that we can take to build better relationship with members of our various committees and with the hope of creating a safe community for all. Thank you. You're on mute.
I shouldn't mute me. Thank you, Titi. We are going to go to next panelist, Rhonda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rhonda Thompson, and I am a member of the Black History Month Celebration Committee, as well as the Congress of Black Women of Manitoba. And I was born and raised here in Winnipeg. My parents are from Jamaica. So I am a first generation Canadian. Me and my twin sister and my older brother were the only ones in our family born in Canada. So I grew up within the educational system here. We were planted in the North End, and actually as a young lady, I grew up actually on Ross Avenue, so right across kitty corner from Rossbrook House. So I have a very strong tie to that neighborhood. And the stories that I hear nowadays coming out of that neighborhood, it really breaks my heart. So it's really pushed me within the last 10 years to really get engaged in community activism and trying to make sure that there's a voice for the voiceless. Yeah. And so I sit on the board of the Black History Month Celebration Committee. And of course, a lot of our events that we present are celebratory in their nature, but what has happened in the last little while that we've really been called to be a voice for our community, and we want to be able to have a seat at some of the tables that with the change makers and be able to get our ideas and initiatives out to the broader community. What we're identifying is that there is a lack of collaboration and a lack of communication between the powers that be and the community members at large. So we are hoping to be a conduit between the two and be able to provide insight to those that may not be living the experience that we are. And I think it's important to know directly from the individuals that are being affected, because to me, policing is a service. So it's providing a service to the community members of Winnipeg, and we want to ensure that everybody is treated fairly and justly. And oftentimes, I think it's belittled the fact that our community is ever changing. And I think within our systems, we need to make sure that that is fluid as well, and making sure that those changes are being reflected across the board, and that there's transparency between the different groups, so that we can ensure that when changes occur, that there's a clear line of communication to who needs to be involved in making those changes, and having those dialogues. So I'm very thankful for the conversation that we're going to have today. And I'm hopeful that with what's happened over the last 12 months, it's really been a cathartic experience within all communities. And I think that people have grown and eyes have been opened because we've been sitting at home. And so a lot of the stuff that we're experiencing, we're seeing it live and direct from the individuals that are going through these experiences. So I think it's important for us to ensure that those voices are heard and that action is taken as well. So it's one thing to have the conversations and know what needs to be done, but it's another thing to be able to act upon that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. We are going to now go over to Reverend Edmund Ledden. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me for this conversation. As you heard in my biographical sketch that I am from Pakistan, one thing which I did not mention is that last year, 2019, on November the 4th, I was medically released from the Canadian Armed Forces Reserve Forces, as I was chaplain for 12 years with the CAF. So there are a couple of incidents I want to share with you before I reflect on the issues or the barriers which we have when we look at community relationship as it relates to visible minorities and the police. In 2007, I was traveling from Fredericton to Halifax. Now, if you have traveled in that part of the world, from Edmundston, New Brunswick to New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, the speed limit is 110 kilometers per hour on TCH. And I was doing around 112, 115. And everyone was passing by. And I was pulled over by an RCMP officer. And he did not give me or could not give me a reason why he had pulled me over. So he wanted to check my trunk. He wanted to know where I was going. So I told him I was going to Stadacona, which is Naval Station in Halifax, as I had to go to chaplain's retreat. And the conversation got more and more heated. And eventually, both of us decided that we work for the same company, so he can let me go. Now, I share that experience with a friend of mine who was in charge of RCMP for Eastern region, the Atlantic provinces, as well as Newfoundland. And he told me about racial profiling. He told me that I fit the bill because I was in my 30s or approaching 40 at that time. I was driving a street racer. I had tinted glass. And he said that was the reason. And we are always looking at people and trying to figure out, because there is a picture which we have through which we judge everyone. Now, moving back to 2008, I'm going to share only 3 experiences. 2008, on December 13th, 2008, we lost 3 soldiers in Afghanistan. So I was embedded with one family, and I went to Toronto or Trenton for the repatriation. And as it was very close to Christmas, we all of us were traveling at different parts, at different time. So I traveled right after the repact. We got into Toronto, and I went on to the airport, and I was still wearing my uniform. And while I checked in, I asked the person if they wanted me to take my jacket off, etc. And at the same time, the commander of Atlantic region, a brigadier general, was checking in at the same time or going through security. And both of us were together at the tarmac. And I was pulled over to the side while I'm wearing the uniform and everything else, while the commander is saying, "Are you really serious that you're pulling my padre off?" And there was a question when I asked, what is the reason? The thing was, "Oh, we pick at people randomly and you are the person." The third thing was 3 years ago or so, someone ran into my car or rear-ended at Polo Park parking lot. So of course, they didn't leave any number, so I had to go and report the incident. Now, the day I went to report the incident, I was at the 17th wing in my uniform, and I asked my supervisor, who was major or lieutenant commander, I asked him if he will come with me to go to Winnipeg Police Services to report the incident. And he asked me why. And I told him that with him, they will take me seriously. I said, with you, I will be taken seriously. Now, I was captain in the Canadian Armed Forces Reserve Forces. I had the highest clearance, security clearance, because some of my job took me to NATO bases, etc. And I asked myself that question over and over again, that why did I worry about going to report an incident? And the answer I came up with, that if I ask any one of you who are panelists or those who are participating, that what they had for dinner 5 weeks ago today, they will not be able to tell. But if I ask every one of us a question, that what were our emotions when we proposed to our partner, or when we graduated from high school, or when we lost a loved one? And it's interesting that all of us will be able to go vividly through it. Now, I'm really romantic. I asked my partner to marry me while we were driving. And I'm glad that because of shock, she was driving, and that she did not, we did not end up in an accident, because she looked at me and she said, really, that's pretty romantic, driving around asking me that we should get married. But I remember the time, I remember the place, I remember her reaction, I remember the car, everything. And that's what, my friend, is called embedded memory system. That the events which affect us profoundly, they become part of our being, and we relive them over and over again. Now, as TT mentioned about people from a Southern Hemisphere, that our experience with police is not the best experience. It's corrupt. Police has its own culture. And most of Canadians, or quite a few Canadians from the Southern Hemisphere, are coming under refugee protection. So what it really means is that they left their home. They were in a refugee camp, and they had to come through there through various means. And there were people who were after their lives, either be guerrilla forces or police or whatever. So when you look at the embedded memories and the stress and trauma they are bringing, and then they run into a police officer who pulls them over, and the person is sheepish, is uncomfortable, is not sure about what he or she should be saying, it doesn't mean that he or she should be profiled and taken aside. It means that we have to have more understanding of the constituency we are serving as leader. I am a spiritual leader, or police officers and otherwise. That who are the people we are really stopping? It doesn't matter if he is a janitor or if she's a professor, but to look at the trauma which people are carrying with them. The other part of this trauma is that it becomes a cumulative trauma. It becomes a communal trauma. So when I share my story with my cousin tells his story to me, and both of us start relating to it.
Exactly.
So I think the barrier which I see in the police business, or community relationship, I should say, is the lack of knowledge and preconceived notions. That it doesn't mean that anyone who looks like me has to be pulled over and for no reason whatsoever and say, I just pulled you randomly, and want to see the car, the inside of the car, outside of the car, who am I married to, where does she live, why did she give me a car? Like nonsense, really, when you think about it. Why did she give me a car? My wife gave me a car to drive. So that's one thing, is the perception. The second is the information which we have about other people, because Canada is a multicultural country. It is becoming more and more multicultural. And regardless of what anyone think about Prime Minister Trudeau, in 2015, he looked at his cabinet when somebody said, why is it so diverse? And he said, because it is Canada. It is 2015. From a refugee, Mariam Youssef, to a member from LGBTQ community, and everyone else represented. So the second thing is that we have to know our situation where we are. And the last but not the least is to have an understanding that racial profiling systemic racism and systemic discrimination has to stop, has to be dealt with, so we continue on with much more better relationship with one another. So I will leave it at that because I know the message is my time is up. So thank you, and we'll deal with certain things during questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Reverend Edmund. We will now go to Sergeant Lucas.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, fellow panelists, Mike and Chibo. Constable Chris Joven and myself are here today. And our purpose was to, and our goal is to provide an introduction to the crime prevention unit that we have in D Division. We have a number of initiatives and strategies we wanted to discuss with you involving outreach. As leaders, stakeholders in your communities, these initiatives can be, after today, brought back to your communities throughout Manitoba. As you know, RCMP are in the rural area, and after consultations, we can be contacted and we can engage directly with community members and other stakeholders in the communities. You'll see from the initiatives what we have in our pocket with a variety of different activities. And then together, we can engage the communities directly. Either depends on COVID restrictions, which are taking place, personally, like we're doing today, virtual through Zoom or other avenues, other platforms, or a combination if the restrictions within the province change. And then, and in the past where we've engaged communities throughout Manitoba, we've used interpreters from the community. On occasion, I've done a presentation in English. Someone beside me would be doing it in French, and another one community member would be delivering it in Swahili. So variety of different things that us in crime prevention services can do. And together, by engaging the communities and outreaching, we're building a stronger relationship between the police and the residents in the rural communities. So that's and for myself, I've been with the RCMP for 33 years. I've worked all over Manitoba, up north in communities where you can only get in by Winter Road during a couple of months during wintertime, float planes, responding to calls for service with skidoos, quads, boats. Down south, worked in south, down along the US border, short little stint up in Nunavut, worked in a variety of different units. Most of my career was with the Yellow Stripe, responding to calls for service, general duty work, some specialized units in the building and throughout Manitoba. Well, and now presently in charge of the crime prevention unit, where we engage the community with different initiatives and strategies. And what I'll do is I'll let Chris do his introduction, and we can kind of go over, together we'll go over some of the strategies, initiatives, programs that we have in our pocket where we can assist the different communities. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Doug. Now we'll go to Constable Chris Joven. 5 minutes. Oh, you are muted, I guess.
What about now?
Yeah. You're muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear.
Perfect. My name is Constable Christopher Joven. I've been with the RCMP now for 14 years. Originally from the Philippines, came here at a young age. I grew up downtown Winnipeg. I always wanted to be a police officer. After that, I was posted up north for a few years. I think my volume's not loud enough. Yeah, so I was posted up north, northern Manitoba and remote communities. Then after that, I was in Ottawa for a bit. I rode the horses on the musical ride. So they posted me there, and I got to put on the red uniform and ride horses all day. Now I'm back in Manitoba. I did a short stint in a couple of posts down here. I was in recruiting. Now I am with the community policing. One of my roles as a diversity liaison is to travel to all the communities in Manitoba and liaise with people, find out some information on their concerns, comments, suggestions, anything regarding the RCMP, and build partnerships with them. I think that's very important, especially if we're going to these communities, we need to understand them and build relationships with them. Yeah, that's all I got.
Well, thank you so very much. Now we are just going to open this session up to questions by the audience. I'll be looking at the panel here from the questions that are fielded from the audience. While we are waiting for those questions to be put on this panel, I think I will get us going. I will ask perhaps the first question, and then you may want to speak to this one and try to keep your remarks to 2 minutes at most. And my question is it possible to develop collaborative strategies that is between the community and the police? If so, how? Yeah, anyone can jump in and.
Okay.
Always coming.
Yeah, I guess I can start. I think it starts with communication is going to be key. So how you start the process is for strategic planning would be to start the conversation. And within that, both parties have to be amicable to change. So it's a matter of putting down our egos and understanding that there's going to be rights and wrongs on both ends of the spectrum. So within the community, there's going to be things that we're going to have to change. And within the policing system, there's going to be changes that have to occur. Now, I think the thought is going to be a little bit more unified on the community side than on the policing, because within the police force, you're going to have varying individuals from varying communities and backgrounds and upbringings. So I think it's to create a system where you're going to have a training base in place so that individuals are to go through a process of educational programs to ensure that they have that insight into anti-racism strategies and policies and putting those in place and being very stringent and strong on those, and ensuring that you put in place a way for officers to be able to identify whether or not there are issues with other officers, right? Because we know about the blue line and that, there's the code that you don't rat on your fellow officers, and you want to make sure that those lines get removed and that officers feel confident that they're able to present those issues as they should come, and that community members can as well address concerns and that they are going to be listened to.
I can add to that. I see, I'll say based on my experience in Winnipeg, I've always lived in Winnipeg. I think the phrase that says when there's a will, there's a way. And the training that Rhonda mentioned, this anti-racism training, I think, yes, definitely in all, like even in my job, when you're going into public service, you have some set of training that all public servants needs to take that training in order to understand your role, regardless of your role when you're interacting with the public. And that is something that I think we don't even know whether the police, and I'm talking law enforcement in general, whether police or RCMP, whether they have that. The public doesn't. We had a town hall in summer during the anti-racism issues when we called the community. And one of the questions that the community asked is that majority of our community members don't even know the job of the police. What is the job of the police? Is it only to attend to crime? What about community development? We don't see police in the community other than coming to do arrests. So perhaps, and I'm sure the job of the police entails more than coming to do arrests. So first of all, public information program, needs to happen to go out there and educate the community about what you do. That is fundamental in what I do, in housing. And the staff that I supervise need to go to our tenant community and, educate them about who they are, what they do, and how they can be of assistance to them when they need anything. We should be going to you, to the police, for help. Not just help when you're in danger, but even for some information, for some clarity, so that we are informed. And then vice versa. Education is two-way. So as we learn about what you do, there's also opportunity for you to learn and understand about the communities in which you serve. And one of the other things that I take in my job is also trying to understand the community. And in my intro, talked about, knowing the community that you serve and not be afraid of the community that you serve. One of the things that we have seen in the community that perhaps continue to perpetuate the ugly relationship between the police and the community is the fact that the police are afraid of the people that they're supposed to be serving. When fear is at the top, it clouds your judgment, and you are always, at this height when interacting with people. So we need to remove those barriers, and it starts with understanding the community you serve. First of all, the basic humanity, that we are all equal, regardless of color, race, where we come, our background, whatever. We just had an example of somebody who is an officer and still experience racial profiling. So that is part of what we're saying here. The training, you need to be non-judgmental. That is key to the job that I do. And if you're non-judgmental, then you are able to remove the person from their behavior and then treat them like a human being, even while addressing a bad behavior. So I think those are key in which should be coming out of the training, but also individual police officers and their leadership also should want to change, should want to understand the community. And if they do want to, I believe it's a lot easier for them to understand the community, and the community also on learning more about who they are, what they do, how can they be of help to me when I need.
So can I speak to it?
Sure.
There's an old saying which says that if you become part of the problem, you will be part of the solution. I think even though I spoke from the perspective that police is racial profiling, etc., but we also have to understand the job, and there was a discussion which happened before, the job which they are called to do. It's very interesting if you are driving around and you see sometimes a truck being pulled over, somebody pulled over, there are 5, 6 cruisers there. Now, why there are 5, 6 cruisers? The question is basically that their job is extremely difficult job, something which I would not be able to do, to stop somebody and not know what you're going to encounter. So the problem then becomes basically, the solution then becomes that how do we acknowledge one another's stress, responsibilities, and also move forward? And I think it is the basic communication. We can have as many seminars we want to have, training we want to have, but the basic communication. So for a police officer to ask me if I'm nervous, that what is making me nervous, instead of jumping to a conclusion. And for me to understand that if an officer is approaching me rather gingerly because he or she is not sure what they will be expecting or what they'll be encountering in the middle of the night if they pulled me over for something, then this is what they have to do, because they are somebody's husband, daughter, wife, children, and so on and so forth. They are human being at the same time. So I think that's where the just making connection at person to person level, acknowledging each other's stress, responsibilities, and being open to learn about the other person, being open to know about the other person, and using those avenues or those windows to dissipate tension, dissipate racism, or whatever we want to feel, or whatever is happening, so we can move forward. So that's what I think would be that one thing I should say before I give it to another person, that I think there has to be a sensitive training, not only in institutional racism and systemic racism, but in also institutional bias and institutional uh, systemic bias in our institutions. And that is for us as well, for the people who are visible minorities, that we do carry institutional or communal bias towards law enforcement agencies. And that is for the other side too, to have that sensitivity about how to diffuse tension, particularly when you're dealing with the people whose experience informs their reaction or their communication with an officer who has pulled them over. Thank you, Kim. So,
well, thank you so much, Edmund. And now we'll either Christopher or Doug can jump in. And
Okay, I think well, I'll start by just going back to what the RCMP is and what we do. So we are the Federal Police Force of Canada. We police all the territories, all the provinces, more than 200 municipalities, and over 192 First Nation communities. We have 3 international airports and also smaller airports. So being in the RCMP, I think we are a bit closer to the community because we live in those small communities compared to, say, Winnipeg Police. You could live anywhere in the city and no one will know who you are. With the RCMP in a small community, everybody knows who you are. They know where you live. They know your name. So I think we can build better relationships that way by actually being there. The RCMP, we're recognized all around the world. We have the red uniform. Everybody knows us. I think we're #1 most recognized symbol in the world. We have more than 29,000 employees. That includes police officers and also civilians. We want to represent the population of Canada, so our employees are very diverse. Our roles in the communities so that we serve, we do investigations, we enforce the laws, we gather intelligence, we maintain peace and order, we protect life and also property. I saw a couple of questions there about continuing courses. In the RCMP, we do have courses that we continue to take to answer one of those questions there in the chat window.
well, thank you, Christopher. Do you have anything to say, Doug, to this question?
Yes, good morning. I'm getting an echo.
Try again. Let's see whether they...
How's that?
Perhaps we will come back to you when they fix that. Let's just go to the next question.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm good now.
Oh, you are good. Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Chris was mentioning. We're the RCMP. We live in our communities. We know our neighbors. Kids go to school in a local school. We engage the different communities. Example, like today, I'll mention, we work with different agencies also, provincial government, Canadian Centre for Child Protection, other NGOs, Alcohol Foundation of Manitoba, where presentations are done to a variety of different audiences. Could be the youth, adolescents, adults, elderly people, prevention programs, home safety, vehicle safety, personal safety, where the members go into they're doing these presentations in the communities. They contact our office, if they need material, or we go out and do the presentations ourselves and set up different initiatives where communities partake. Like for example, one area, one of many areas we're looking is involving bullying and cyberbullying. We partner with the WITS Foundation, involving evidence-based programming, providing literature. Lots of the work involves the police within the schools or an area where they can engage the youth. We work with a program that the Canadian Red Cross has, where we partner with Be Safe, where within a school environment. Usually it's in the school environment. You focus on and talk to and introduce this topic to kids that are 5 or 9, very new, not a lot of life experiences, and BCA focuses on child sex abuse, preventing the awareness of it. You know, this isn't good, this is bad, and bring it to an adult. So there's these things that we're doing with the youth to bring awareness to different topics. Also, another program with the Red Cross where we work with them also is teaching caregivers and parents how to discipline, how not to discipline, how to sit down and talk to the youth, the adults, the parents. How we can address issues. You know, there's issues. There's concerns dealing with gangs and drugs. You know, we'll go on and we'll explain to the youths, the adolescents, the parents. You know, how do the gangs recruit? Where are the vulnerable teenagers? What are they? What are the signs? What to watch out for? We'll do presentations. We set up workshops in that. In dealing with gangs, the identifications, and that easily rolls into drugs, drug abuse. What's the awareness? What drugs are out there? You know, we always think of, we think of cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamine, but there's a lot of other things that are coming to the surface. So we bring in community, all ages, we can do it in smaller groups, specific age groups, or we can talk to the group as a whole, talk about the identification of the different types of drugs, what they are, their effects. So parents will know when their kids come home and they find this pipe or rolling papers, which they don't smoke, in their pocket, they realize, oh, I remember reading or hearing something about, okay, my kid might be involved with something. So it opens the communication between the parents, and also, dealing with the paraphernalia. There's on the provincial website, there's a book like this. Oh, it's backwards. Project Gang Proof, gangs, parents, youth, what the awareness, what to be aware of. So there's a lot of different things we have in our pockets, and there's a lot of other items we can talk about. Online safety, sexual exploitation, how kids are being lured, the pornography, all this. We have specialized units, integrated child exploitation, where they go out and they talk at the level of the kids, the teenagers. They explain, and it's interesting when you watch this presenter talk to the youth, the kids' mouths just drop. They look and go, holy cow, this police officer at the front, he talks my language. He knows about all the little tours, platforms, instruments that are being used. And he reaches out to them and brings awareness. And then, there's other things dealing with impaired driving, alcohol, drugs. We work with Manitoba Public Insurance, involving different programs. We have human trafficking, adult abuse, child abuse, healthy relationships. So there's a lot of different things we have in our pockets, which we bring we deliver to the communities. And where I think this is really important, this venue is, like Rick, Chris and myself are reaching out to a variety of different, I guess we're looking at right now 60 participants. Probably there's a lot more. And those 60 participants can talk to another 5 people. So the word spreads, so we can engage that way. Outreach is really important, and that's where our unit is, and I'm happy to be part of it. We're explaining some of the initiatives and the goals that we have in our pocket. And that's at our level, but also we have at the national level, National Crime Prevention Services have our CMP talks, where we have experts in the field through different platforms. Zoom is used most of the time, where 60-minute presentations are set up in the communities or in the schools, where topics are where topics are discussed with the youth. For example, drug and alcohol impaired driving, substance abuse, cyber bullying, sexual exploitation, some things he talked about, but they have the experts down in reaching out to the communities. So I just, I threw a lot of things at you, a very high level overview, but there's a number of other things that are in our pocket. So if there is something where someone would want to get further information, presentations, material, definitely reach out to Chris and I. Okay, I think I've gone over 1 minute. I'll turn it over to the next question.
Well, thank you so much for speaking into that. I mean, questions are pouring in. So I think for the sake of time, I think we have less than 30 minutes. So I'll field some questions from the participants. If you feel that somebody or one of the panelists has already said what you wanted to say, you may decide to pass and wait for the next one. So I will read some questions randomly as I see them here. The first question is, what is the police doing to improve its interaction with the non-white public? And this goes beyond community policing branch and must be objective. I think that's, I mean, the question really is, what is the police doing to improve its interaction with the non-white public? I think this is for the officers.
You're still muted.
Okay, does that work? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so what we're doing is, you know, like we go to the communities and we provide these presentations. We, you know, sit with their committees. I sit on a few committees and develop partnerships. I'm with the Westman Immigrant and Settlement, the Pembina Valley. I'm starting a program with.
Sorry, Chris, we can hardly hear you. Yeah.
Let me try this again.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, what we do is, you know, I've developed quite a few partnerships with different immigration and settlement agencies. So I'm trying to go all around Manitoba, and from there, you know, we talk to youth. We get ideas from them. We get ideas from the newcomers. I also provide them a newcomer presentation. Right now, since we're doing everything on Zoom, I'm working with the Westman Immigrant Center, and we're working on citizenship. So I'm helping them with that program. I'm open to ideas. You know, if we don't have a program for it, I can definitely assist them if they have ideas. Again, that's to build relationships with the communities, and I think that's what's very important to go out there and communicate with them. Once the restrictions are let out, you know, then we can go in person, which is probably a little bit better than trying to communicate on Zoom, because I know everybody's kind of getting tired of the online systems. But you know, just time will, you know, get everything back to normal.
Can I add? And I think I'm speaking on behalf of, you know, minority communities. What we've seen is, yes, the departments, whether it's RCMP or our own Winnipeg Police, they do have the community relations unit. And it's a handful of officers that are expected to then build relationship throughout, you know, maybe the province or the city. My concern is, yes, we get to know those officers and we have cordial relationship, we know them. But what about the rest of the officers that are, you know, doing traffic stops, that are, you know, investigating crimes, the rest of the like? Do they have the same perception? Because once you start working in the community, you certainly learn a lot more. You are working with human beings and you treat them like human beings, and they also see you as human beings, and you develop that mutual respect. What I don't think we see is the same, you know, behaviors that you in the community relations office or unit that you exhibit. We don't see it from the general populace of the law enforcement, and they are way more than you. What is the RCMP doing to ensure that this education, this bias, discrimination, racial profiling, that officers in general, see people as human beings. The same blood runs through our veins. We have a trauma. People have background, trauma in the background. Who knows what somebody is dealing with, and then you stop them, and then you start, racial profiling, asking questions that don't even belong, asking them why they are driving such a nice car, so I don't understand. Help us understand whether, yes, we understand you, we get community relations, and unfortunately, sometimes it looks like lipstick, that is just promote RCMP or promotes the police force, but you're promoting it to maybe a certain group of community leaders, but we have more of our community members out there that don't know and see this same relationship, behavior from the general populace. Help us understand what is happening behind the scenes.
I think Doug was ready to jump in. Perhaps he can address that question together with what he wanted to say.
Yeah, the RCMP members do take courses. It's not only our 6 months training in depot, and definitely things have changed since I've got in a number of years ago, but even things are changing with the training in depot in Regina. And once we're in the field, members do go on culture diversity courses, sensitivity courses. There's courses that in classroom, there's ones we do online. So the members do, if you want to say upgrade, or do take courses on a variety of different things, just like even our general operations work, our general duty work. Things are changing. Policies are changing. Criminal code is changing. Highway Traffic Act offenses, provincial statutes change. So we're always taking courses to get better, to learn. And I'll make a reference here. If you want to look at take a look at the RCMP webpage, the national webpage, we have the RCMP 150 vision tracker, and there's a diversity component with information in there. And these are things that the RCMP, we're learning, we're always learning, and some of the things that we've seen, and strategies are being built, initiatives at the very high level nationally, and there's a list there, and it shows what we're doing at the national level, and then of course, national down to provincial and down to the detachments. And then even what Chris and myself and the other members with our Indigenous Policing Service, Crime Prevention Service, Crime Reduction, Crime Stoppers, that's very important, and our restorative justice programs, where we are working directly with communities, with the residents. So it's like a big upside down funnel where information's coming down, and we learn objectives, we learn the initiatives, and we develop them at the community level, at our level, to address and deliver to the communities and through the outreach and engagements. So, but the RCMP 150 Vision Tracker has a lot of good information on where the RCMP is going, and the direction we're taking. And there's a box there where if there's questions that are posed, you can ask the questions, and experts would be able to provide an answer. Like I'm not an expert on a few of the topics that were addressed at the beginning. I'm here dealing with crime prevention strategies and initiatives. Chris has a wealth of knowledge on the recruiting side and where he's doing his work. So, I have a wealth of knowledge on gang and drugs, my expertise in the past. So a lot of different expertises in there within the RCMP. So I guess I'll stop. I'm rambling on a bit. I'll let further questions surface.
All right. Perhaps this other question which is coming up also will kind of focus more specifically on what we are dealing with. If you may, as each one of us address the question, how do you, as an individual, in your capacity as a community member or as a police officer, work at building trust between community and police? If you may take just 2 minutes to address that question so that I see we're running out of time. How do you personally?
Can I take a lead on that to start with the
Sure,
answer to that?
sure.
I think one thing about the trust, when we say trust, trust is not built, it's earned. And it is earned from both parties. And the basic premise of trust is to admit what is going wrong and to have resolve to address what is going wrong. I'm surprised that racial profiling has not been addressed yet at any juncture. I appreciate all the programs which are in place and so on and so forth, but how does that affect a person who is being pulled over? And the other part of the trust is the whole vulnerability and humility, that there has to be vulnerability and transparency about the issues which we are talking about. And unless we come to that level of openness, transparency, humility, vulnerability, and admitting what is going on, openly admitting that what is going on, because to say somebody, but you look like that does not answer any question, does not build any trust. To say somebody, oh, if you would have told me before, I would not have done that, doesn't do anything. It exacerbates situation. So I think that's where it is that if we want to build trust as a community leader, that's what I would be much more engaging towards. And as I have an experience of working in Canadian Armed Forces and all that, that is one thing which we hammered on our members, that we have to have trust because we are going into very difficult situations. Is it achievable? Yes, it is. But there has to be a desire. And there is a premise, which is the given, that we admit what is going wrong, what has gone wrong, and move from that perspective or move from that question to how can we address and be in a better relationship in the community and relationship between the community and the law enforcement agencies.
Thank you, Adnan.
I think I'd like to add, I think that in having these critical dialogues that we're to be having here today, I think we need to ensure that we're not candy coating what's occurred and making sure that we're hitting the tough topics. So it's very multi-pronged, the approach to this. And while community relationship is one thing, I think being able to address the entrenched systemic racism and building towards reform of the programs as a whole. And I think that's why the call to abolishment has come up, because individuals figure that if you're not willing to fix what you have, then throw it all away altogether and start over and allow the community to have a voice in what that looks like. So while many people don't agree with a total abolishment, reform is required. So we need to, like, what is the RCMP itself as a body doing? And if you officers don't have that answer, who does? And how does that information get to the community? Because I think that's what people are wanting to hear. It's something that's very difficult. It's a large issue to tackle, but knowing that is being tackled is, I think, what individuals want to know. It's like, is there something in place to identify the wrongs and correct them? It's one thing to know that there's something wrong, but what are you going to do to fix it? So I think maybe
one of the, sorry if I can just add, one of the, maybe not concern, but, you know, our expectation is, or surprising, is to see that, yes, we're saying that police or law enforcement are biased against the citizens that they're supposed to be protecting. But it's surprising and shocking that they're also biased against their own members. So minority members, you know, we've seen on TV, you know, I'm not part of, but, you know, national TV, you know, bias against women, bias against indigenous police officers, you know, and who knows who else, you know, have been biased, that the RCMP specifically have been biased towards. You know, we've seen the woman that was, you know, discriminated against for years in the RCMP. And so ownership of a wrong is the beginning of change. And if not the two of you, perhaps we need to be speaking with somebody higher up to really have these frank conversations. Like I said before, we've worked with the community relations unit, and sometimes it looks like a lipstick. But real changes doesn't happen. It's left to those 2 or 3 or 5 officers in that unit, and they're expected to, change everything. That's not enough. So we want to speak to people that have the power to enact change, so they can really hear the conversations that we have, how people are feeling and what people really want to see. And again, it's not about talk. Law enforcement needs to show the community. It's about actions. It's about actions. Yes, we can do presentations, but how are we relating to people in the community? I don't know whether you do maybe attend to events in the community to show up as, just not there to do any function other than say hi, do some interaction with the people in the community. Yeah, there may be questions about we don't have enough people, things like that, but those are things that build relationship. I work in public service and relationship building, I work in tenant relations. So that is the core. To get people on your side, you need to interact positively with them. You need to make that time. And unfortunately, not many people understand that. They think that's just being social. Yes, it's through social interaction that we build trust, that we learn about each other, and we also pave way in how we're going to relate in the future. So, yeah.
Yes, and perhaps I know the officers will be jumping in to speak to this issue, and again I think I'll be doing some rounds to say I realize that we have leaders here as as a community leaders or leaders in the police force. I would love to hear us as leaders to really speak to this issue. How do we personally contribute, or how have we personally contributed to making this relationship between the police and the community work?
For sure.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay. Go first.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, as a community leader, a number of different organizations came together in the spring, and Ms. Titi is part of the coalition that sprung from that. The Police Accountability Coalition was formed earlier, mid 2020, and it's a group of individuals that came together in order to create a strategic plan from the community standpoint, and it was presented to the Winnipeg Police Board back in September. It involved 13 recommendations to the board that the police service be advised to do some different actions from our standpoint, because we had heard a lot of talk and media had definitely jumped on the actions that had occurred back in the spring that we saw. And as a result of the rally that we had here, we saw that there was a lot of support behind that. But what our concern was that once the cameras and the interviews stopped, that the support for the push was going to be was going to dissolve as well. So we wanted to make sure that we rode the wave and the doors were open, and we rushed in and made sure that we sat at the tables where the changes were being made. So that's what we had done. So the Police Accountability Coalition is open to all community members to be a part of. They can engage with us. They can provide us with their stories so that we know going forward, because this is not something that we're going to let up. And we want to work in collaboration with the Winnipeg Police Service as well as the RCMP in order to ensure that those recommendations are followed through on, and that new programs come up in order to make sure that changes are actually made.
Yeah. And I think we can provide that recommendation to the RCMP as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And then Chris wanted to jump and say something.
To answer your question, Kim, about personally, I was lucky enough to be posted in small communities. So, on duty, off duty, I was there. If there was any community events, I would take my family to them. It was more of just being part of the community to build those relationships, so they can see you not just as a police officer, but also as a member. I think that's very important. And, for all the new members coming in, I would talk to them and, tell them what it's like, and build these relationships. That way, it makes the job a lot easier. You never know, you could be in trouble one day and somebody from the community can help you. So I think, just passing on that information is important. That's all I had to add.
Cool.
You have something to say, Doug, or you?
Yes.
Person?
Yeah, I just mentioned that it's we do work in partnership with other organizations, and one of them is the Winnipeg Police Service. We do the two crime prevention units talk. We go to events together. If I'm invited to do a presentation, a talk, say in the city of Winnipeg. Winnipeg City Police Officer, I always contact their unit to have someone attend also. I'll give you a quick 2-minute story. About 3 years ago, myself and another officer were in Red Surge for Remembrance Day. And we went to one of the cities in the school for their ceremony. We got asked to go. So we're there in Red Surge, and we finished the ceremony finished. So we thought, let's go to school. Let's talk to the students. So we went to the different classrooms and talking to students, talking about, about our ceremonial uniform. Usually this is what we have. We have a yellow stripe. Winnipeg City has another color stripe. And we went into one of the classrooms, and this was a boy about, I think 9-10 years old. And soon as we walked in, he stood up to attention and saluted us. And we were we stood back for a second and said, okay, so we said, well, let's spend some time with the class. So we sat down, talked to the boy. So you saluted to us. He says, well, you're the military. No. And he's a new Canadian. And so we sat down and said, we're the police. No, police and the military are the same. So we had a long conversation with the class. We spent a good part of our time there explaining the differences between police, military, our uniform, differences between our CMP working uniform and Winnipeg City Police uniform. So I think that was really important for the students in that class and the youth to understand. And it was obvious the police were grouped into one. And like something really sad the boy said was, where I grew up, the military, when someone goes, they might not come back. The family might not see him again. And that's the police and military. And that's how they were, what he grew up with. And hopefully by our conversation, he realized there's a difference in every other student, that, police are there to help. Work with the youth, work with the communities. A handshake and a promise is really important. That we're lucky in Canada in what we have. Working together. I'll leave it as that then. That's probably a little more than 2 minutes.
Well, that's it. Thank you so much. I think time is our enemy, as you can tell. I think we're going to be running down here. I received 2 communications here. The 2 participants want to hear the Reverend speak to this issue of how he personally, I think, has worked to improve relationships between the police. And just 2 minutes. And then after you speak, we will hand everything over to Chibo. I may take this time to just say thank you so much to the panelists. This is a vibrant discussion. I know that's only the beginning. And I know some of the participants put a lot of questions, which we tried to put together. And they given a time span, as you can tell. That's the best we could humanly do. So over to Reverend, and then after that we'll head.
Jim, I missed the question because there was a break in the transmission. So can you repeat the question again, please?
The question is how have you personally worked towards building mutual relationships of trust between the police and the community? Just 2 minutes. Yeah.
Well, I lived in small parts of Canada, or small, really small semi-urban centers. And as Chris spoke about it, that there is a relationship with the police. But so that's where, as we knew everyone and everyone knew the people, and it was completely white communities. I have been to churches where I was the only visible minority. And it was interesting that every church started saying that they're multicultural church. I didn't realize that one person makes a community multicultural. But with regards to working with the police and relationship, Chris spoke about the ride, the horse riding and other things. And I do know that in Newfoundland, Western Newfoundland, RCMP and Newfoundland police started doing camps at local campgrounds, where they invited the parents and children to come for a day or 2 days. And that's where they interacted at human level, even to the point that they brought the canine unit. I was there when I saw that happening, canine unit, and how canines basically engage and how they disengage and what are their rules and regulations, etc. And those were fascinating things. So I think basically that the temptation for me as person is that I wish I had a magic wand. I was Gandalf the White from Lord of the Rings, and I can make everything right by just waving the wand. But that's not the case. So the case is that we have to find the common grounds. We have to find the common place. As I look at Chris, who is, and I'm picking Chris for a reason, who represent new Canadians in RCMP, it will be a good conversation for Chris and I to have with our congregation or somewhere to see where we are going. So looking back at just summarizing it, that it is to take all the veneers out, everything which we pretend to be, which we put forward in front of people with our education, our training, our background, etc., and deal at a person at a very humane, basic level, where a person can understand in Newfoundland between RCMP and the communities in which we lived.
Thank you again.
I'm done.
Thank you so kindly. Chibo, I think to be continued.
Yes, it's to be continued. Thank you so much, everyone, for this wonderful conversation. I just want to use a minute to remind everyone that this is just the first in the series, that we hope we can have one webinar every month going forward, at least for the next 6 or 7 months. And just a brief response to, I think, 2 important questions or observations that some of the attendees raised about the lack of an Indigenous representative in this conversation. We weren't able to bring someone in, not because we didn't plan for that, but because the logistical plans and the timing did not allow us to get responses early enough to factor that into this first webinar. But definitely expect more representation in that regards in future webinars. And we hope that some of the panelists today would join us in some of the future webinars as well. So thank you so much for these conversations and for your perspectives and insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.